DBS community, welcome back to another video here with Kyle Chris. Today we are going to be going over a list that I don't think it's updated too much since I've played it, but I've had a few people ask me about a current list for Shenron, Xeno, or Silmil, Xeno Sin, whatever you guys want to call them. This is a deck that I've piloted quite a bit. Obviously, if you guys have followed the channel, you guys know this. I've played this deck. I don't want to say more than anybody else in the community, because that's obviously, there's, you know, who knows how many people have actually played the deck, right? But I've definitely have done well when I've played this deck. And, you know, among other people too. And I have a pretty good idea of how this deck is, how this deck runs. It hasn't changed too much over the past few sets, just because there hasn't really been much to add to it. However, we're going to go over a full competitive list. Both the Z deck and the side deck will also be included for the current format, and I'll kind of talk about that as we go through it, just to give you guys kind of an idea on what matchups and things that this deck would need to be able to play this stuff against. So, if you guys don't know, Shenron is a mill deck. This is a mill deck that operates generally with extra cards, being able to activate them either on your turn or the combo step, both on you and your opponent's turn. Every time you activate an extra card, you and your opponent both mill on the front side. On the awakened side, your opponent mills a card. This deck is very good, and depending on the format, this deck can crush most of the format cards, because you're able to mill on your opponent's turns, right? And also you can be able to mill your opponent during their combo step, which is something I've done quite a few times. I'm sure there's videos on the channel where I've actually done that as well, dating back to some other tournaments over the past few years. But this deck is probably still the best pure mill deck in the game. I think this deck is better than Janempa in a lot of different ways, just from the versatility that this deck has. Yeah, it's a very, very powerful deck. So the awaken side, so you can awaken whenever you have 7 or more dragons, which all of your extra cards also count as dragons, so you can awaken when you have 7 or more of any of them in there. You are a restand 1, draw 1 leader, and whenever you attack, you gain 5k on the front side. Now, your leader does have blockers, so if you attack with your leader, you do get to restand it. Something to note is that you cannot attack, so if you attack on the unawakened side and you awaken, you do not get to, I believe you don't get to restand off of the auto, because the auto never procced on that side. So that is something to keep in mind. I've learned that just through experience of playing the deck, so you have to make sure you're swinging on... Honestly, it's probably better to awaken actually on your opponent's turn, like during the combo step, but that's just me. And then you have Activate Mana Battle. You can Spirit Boost 1, and you get to activate a extra card, a Shadow Dragon extra card, which I'm just going to call them spells, that cost 2 or less from your hand without paying its energy cost, which is very, very powerful. So, first card is going to be Toa. This is your Unison. This is the only Unison you play in the deck. If you're thinking about playing a different Unison in the deck, don't. There's only one Unison for this deck as of right now, which is going to be Toa. So Toa, a lot of different effects. Whenever your leader activates Blocker, this card gains a marker, and you mill the top card of your deck, which kind of helps, and kind of it fills the drop area up for different plays, also for your Awaken as well. +1, you draw a card, you bottom deck 1, and then you shuffle 3 Shadow Dragon spells back into the bottom of your deck. Or you not shuffle, but you place them in the bottom of your deck in any order. This just allows you to get a little bit of cycle. Unfortunately, it's not a hard +1, which I wish they would have done. If this card just said +1, and then put 3 back at the bottom, this Unison would be amazing. But unfortunately, they took away that effect for whatever reason. The -7, which doesn't come up often, but you get to play out 7 Shadow Dragons with different character names from your drop or your hand. It doesn't come up too often. Most people are trying to kill the Unison, or your Spirit Boosting in the Unison's not going to have 7 markers on it anyways. But it is something to think about, especially in like long control matchups. It is a potential that you can do. Quick note for this is so this Unison's pretty safe in this format. Black Smoke, unfortunately, for the Black Smoke player, does not hit this at all. So if your opponent taps 2 to play Black Smoke and they choose to warp the Unison, they can't, because this has no specific cost. But there is a lot of Unison removal in the game still. You have you know, 3 or 4 secret rares that can technically remove the Unison without having to do anything, really. So That's kind of a problem, but it is what it is. Once you get to like turn 4, turn 5, your opponent should be pretty close to being milled out anyways. Or they milled out their secret rare, or they milled out the card that they would use to remove this card anyways. So we have 5 1-drops in the deck, 2 of the Sin Shenron promos, and then 3 Natron. So every battle card in this deck, except for this Natron, has the following effect. So I'm not going to explain on the other cards. When it's pitched from your hand by a Shadow Dragon skill, or it's played, you scry the top card of your deck. If it is a Shadow Dragon card, which it's more likely going to be, you only run 5 non-Shadow Dragon cards in the main board. You reveal it and add it to your hand. If not, you place it at the bottom of your deck. So Natron does not have that effect. Natron has, when it's pitched off of a Shadow Dragon effect, you get to scry. But the on-play effect is when you play the card, you get to grab any Shadow Dragon spell back from the drop area, add it to your hand. So when you pitch it off of a skill, right, any card in this deck that is a Shadow Dragon, including the leader, that discards 1 will proc this effect. So off of the leader effect, you pitch a Shadow Dragon. You can scry the top card of your deck. If it's a Shadow Dragon, which it probably will be, you'll draw. And then your leader also draws a card anyways. So you get to draw. So you're essentially pitching 1, drawing 2. Right? Like I said, Natron does not have the have the play effect. It just has a effect where you grab an extra card back from the drop area. Still very important because you do want to be able to grab some of your extra cards back, especially if you need them in a particular situation. Wicked Strike, promo that came out with the set that this leader came out in, has the same activate main as your leader does. So activate main or battle, Spirit Boost 1, you can activate an extra card that costs 2 or less from your hand. So it's good to just have 1-drops. They cycle, they allow you to draw a card, and also can be pitched, right? They also just count as Shadow Dragons. Wicked Strike comes up a lot in yellow matchups, because yellow does have a hard time of just removing battle cards that are on board. Other matchups, though, it more likely is going to die, but it is something you can still play to get the effect off and force them to have removal for it. 4 of the Nova Shenron, this is your Searcher. This card's very good. So you pitch it from your hand, it goes to the warp, you burst 1, you search top 5, you grab any Shadow Dragon card 5 or less, which is going to be the majority of your deck. So you can grab almost anything. And then also has its 20k crit. So if you do play it, you can have a 20k crit, but we're never going to play this card. We actually do not, as you see, we do not run the 1-drop Haze. It is a bad card. Do not play it. It has no protection. You're basically paying 2 to play 3 drops. It's not very good. Unfortunately, if that card had barrier, it would be far better, but unfortunately it does not have barrier. So until we get a better 1-drop, we're not playing any of the chain cards where you're going up the chain. So but this is just there as a Searcher as well. 4 of the Sin Shenron Power of Darkness. This is your 20k double strike. You can play it for 1 if you Spirit Boost a marker off your Unison. When this card is played off of that effect, your opponent mills the card. So if you activate an extra card, they're going to mill 1. You play this, they mill 2. This card scries. Your other card does whatever it does. And it's a 20k double strike. It's not unique. It is limit 1 per on the auto, but you can do that on you or your opponent's turn. So it technically can act as a mill 2 on your opponent's turn as well if you activate an extra card. 4 Rage Shenron Power of Darkness. This is your negate. If you have 7 or more Shadow Dragon cards in the drop, this card becomes a 1-drop. It has a blocker, but unfortunately it comes in rest mode for some stupid reason. But it is a 14k blocker. You can play it for 1, just a negate. It also is a 1-drop on your turn, so you can play it on your turn as well. It's like Mecha Frieza in that regard. So you can play it on your turn, and then it's a 14k blocker. But we're just using this as a 1-drop negate, essentially. 1 of the Negative Energy Explosion Nova. This is a 16k crit. We play this almost never. We have it in the deck for 2 reasons. 1, if for whatever reason we do not have a Unison and we're in like turn 5, we can play this. Let's say we milled a Unison. We can play this from our hand. It plays out the Unison from the drop area. Another reason why you play this card is that if you do -7, you can choose to play this Nova and then this Nova will replay your Unison from the drop. So you -7 on the Unison. The Unison goes to the drop. You play out all these dragons. You play out Nova from your hand or your drop. The auto will trigger, and then you will play out the Toa Unison from the drop with a marker on it. So you do end up getting back your Unison, which is very, very powerful. So we do run one of it. It also is just a very easy pitch target, which is sometimes hard to do in this deck because there are certain dragons you don't want to pitch, especially if you haven't seen the other ones. 2 of the Shenron negative energy explosion, the 4-drops. Deflect, double strike, barrier blocker. Activate main or battle. Spirit boost 1, you restand this card. Your opponent mills a card, and then you activate an extra card that costs 2 or less. So if you use the activate main or battle on this, and you play out like a 2-drop extra card, which we'll go over, those also mill your opponent a card, and then your leader will also mill them a card. So you can mill them 3 off of one of these Shadow Dragon cards. So very, very powerful effect. We only run 2, just because more likely we're going to end up playing 1 per game. But you can also slide in a 3rd one if you don't want to run like this Nova here. 4 Oceanus negates. Most people probably know what this card does. Play it down. Opponent has to mill 4 every time they attack. The cool thing about this, and a lot of people don't know, is that if your leader is a Shadow Dragon and you pitch a Shadow Dragon card from your hand, this card has a scry effect. So technically, and this card when it's played also scries, right? So you play this, you pitch a Shadow Dragon, you're essentially just cycling 2 cards. So you're not losing any cards from hand. So Oceanus becomes a neutral play rather than a -2. Very powerful, very, very powerful card. Obviously works perfectly in this deck because it is Shadow Dragons, but this is just good in almost any deck. 4 Omega Shenron, Darkness Absorbed. So this is a 30k unique. You can play it for 1 black if you sack off any Shadow Dragon on your board that costs 5 or less. So a lot of these 1-drops, the Rage Negate, you tap 1, you play it. This card comes into play, does the scry effect, but then also warps any of your opponent's battle cards. No energy requirement, so they can just warp any battle card as long as it doesn't have barrier. So, and then it is just a 30k body. I wish this was not unique because this is something that could have made the deck, I would say, aggro. Being able to swap into these 30k bodies for 1 energy is a very powerful effect, but unfortunately Bandai decided to give this card unique for some reason, so we can't do that. 4 Oceanus negates, obviously on theme with the deck. It's sparking 5. We generally awaken between 5 and 6 life, so being able to have a sparking negate, sparking super combo that works whenever we have 5 cards in the drop, which we're gonna have 5 cards in the drop, and also it is on theme as well. So 3 whirlwind and 3 negative energy explosions. So these are your 1-drop searchers. Every extra card in this deck can work in the main phase or the battle phase. So activate main or battle on ultimate whirlwind spin. You search top 5 for any Shadow Dragon card. So you can search out any of the battle cards that you see here. You have a second effect where you can pitch a card from your hand. If you do, your leader gets 1k for the turn. It's a very cool little bean effect. If your opponent's playing like a 15k board spam, you can go up to 16k to force them to combo. It's mainly used to get your 7 in drop, so then you can awaken, right? So if you're at 4 cards in drop, you use ultimate whirlwind spin. You both are going to mill a card, so you're going to go to 5. Ultimate whirlwind spin is going to put you at 6, and then if you pitch another card, you'll go to 7. You pitch a Shadow Dragon card, you get to scry the top card of the deck. So not only do you draw off whirlwind spin, then you can draw off of this card as well, essentially not losing any card from hand, and then you're able to awaken without having to swing. So very powerful. Negative energy explosion does kind of the same thing, but searches out only spells, or you can play out your Unison if you hit it off the top 7. So this is very good to have, especially like if you mulligan for a Toa and you don't see it. But you see this, you play this turn 1, you play this off the top 7, you're more likely going to see it, and now you have your Unison on board. 4 negative energy charge. So this was the last bit of support that this deck did get. It is a 1-drop negate. It has an effect where you can search out a Dragon Ball, which unfortunately the negative energy explosions don't count as a Dragon Ball. You can grab a Dragon Ball from the drop area. Also is a negate that counts as a Shadow Dragon, so when you negate with this, your opponent mills a card, which is hilarious. So you get to stop an attack and they mill a card. Activate main or battle. Send up to 7 cards from your drop area to your warp. Then you get to choose 1 effect. So you either get to activate the Dragon Ball negative energy overflow, which is a secret rare from set 8, I believe, which has an effect when it's activated at the end of the turn. Both players warp their entire boards. But you activate this from your deck. or it's a deck or hand. I've actually never, yeah, I think it's just deck. The second effect is you may pay 4 energy. If you do, you get to play your Black Smoke Dragon Eternal Evil secret rare from your deck or your hand. Now this is obviously the secret rare of choice for the deck. First thing first, back when God Sealing was a thing, and it is kind of popular now with yellow decks because they have effects that can negate in a card before it comes in. So with negative energy charge, as soon as you activate main or battle this, your opponent has to answer in that window. So this card creates a counter window 1. Doesn't matter which effect you pick, your opponent has to counter before you actually choose the effect, which is hilarious. So like back when God Sealing was a thing, you can activate the negative energy ball charge. Your opponent then would have to God Sealing in that window. If they do not God Sealing in that window, you just play Black Smoke. If you don't, then you choose the first effect. You look for the overflow energy from your deck. Don't activate it, obviously. You just choose 0, and then you can activate another one because it is not once per turn. So, one of the win conditions you can do with this deck, and essentially once your opponent gets down to about 12 cards, they've probably have lost the game. You can generally mill them out 12 cards in a turn, just depending on how your board is set up. But one way you actually can mill out your opponent very, very easily on like turn 5 is you use the Sin effect here. Use the activate main to activate this card from your hand. So this will mill them a card. Then your leader will mill them a card off of this. Then you tap 4 to play this. And then Smoke Dragon has tons of different effects. You can warp 4 cards from your opponent's hand. They can warp their entire board ignoring barrier, but we're going to use the main effect, which is they warp the top 7 cards of their deck, and we get to draw 2 cards. So between those, you're milling them 9 cards on their turn. They're then drawing a card going to 10. So you can mill them from 10 in one foul swoop. But also depending on what else you have on your board, if you have another Shadow Dragon Sin, you also can use your leader effect to mill them another card as well. You can end up milling 12 cards in a turn, 12, 13, 14 cards in a turn. So which is really funny because when you get to a certain point, like once your opponent gets like under like 16, 17 cards in deck, you start looking at them, you're like, okay, this is basically in the bag. We just have to kind of wait. So it sucks if you do mill your Black Smoke because then the game almost becomes impossible to win depending on the matchup. So that is the one problem with the deck, is you cannot get Black Smoke back. We don't run any way to get Black Smoke back. You don't need to. If you mill it, you mill it. If you don't, you don't. Ultimate Energy Ball. This is a 15k ignoring barrier warp. If you have a unison in play, it's free. It also, activate main or battle, you give a battle card or your leader 15k for the battle. So also it can just be a pump. But again, your opponent will mill a card as well. 2 Ultimate Dragon Quakes. This warps any battle card during the main phase or the battle step that is greater than your opponent's energy. And then if they have 15 cards or more left in deck, when this card, the card comes back at the end of the turn, very similar to like Supreme Kai Negate. If they have less than 15 cards in deck, it goes to the drop area instead of being played. So one thing that happens quite often is that your opponent will hand dump on something. You'll just either tap 1 or activate main to play it for free, warp the battle card, case closed, right? We only run 2 just for deck space. 1 Ultimate Dragon Tackle. This is a Unison hate card. It's not as popular anymore because Boo Unison has been taken on the 1. This was kind of like your go-to to get rid of Boo Unison. Activate main if your opponent has to have a Unison in play to activate this card. Because this is a 2-drop extra card, your opponent will mill off of this effect and your leader effect. So, but if your opponent either takes off 2 markers off of their Unison, if they don't, you get to draw a card and warp any of their battle cards. So it can also just be a cycle card and also mills them 2 cards. Very, 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 very good card. But it's not as popular anymore because of the Unison. Like a lot of decks don't play Unisons. But it still isn't just important to have. If you're playing in a best of 1 pre-side and you're playing a deck that doesn't play Unisons, and you know they don't play Unisons, you can just side it out. But I like to keep it in there. It also, like if they don't play Unisons, it's just a free charge. And then 3 Ultimate Ice Rays. Same effect as Ultimate Dragon Tackle. They mill a card. Then you pitch 2 cards from hand. You pitch 2 black cards from hand, sorry. And your opponent can only attack with battle cards 1 more time for the turn. So it's almost like a floodgate, in a sense. Very, very good card. Also, this counts as a Shadow Dragon, so if you discard 2 Shadow Dragon effects, battle cards off of this effect, you do get to scry the top 2 cards. So, and instead of being a -3 from hand, it ends up being a -1, which is pretty cool. And then obviously the Smoke Dragon card. So that is the main deck. It is a 56 card main deck. We're then going to go down to the Z deck, which is right here. So we have 3 Majin Boos. This card actually does come up pretty often in the deck. This is just a good way of just removing stuff from your opponent's board. We don't combo a ton. Obviously, our super combos and maybe like 1 or 2 other cards. But playing 1 or 2 of these in a game, you get to just remove stuff off board. And now you have a blocker on board that you can use to play a little more defense around. 1 Vegeta Surmounting. Just in case our opponent is like, we don't have the ability of awakening via our secondary awakening condition with the 7 cards. If we need to go down to 4, we can use Vegeta Surmounting to go down to 4, and now we can awaken ourselves. And then we have 3 Pan. So people might look at this and say, why are you playing Pan? Top part doesn't matter. Bottom effect, activate main, bond 3, cards with Xeno in its character name. If you guys have read any of these battle cards, all of these battle cards have Xeno in their name. So every single battle card except for Black Smoke has Xeno in their name. So essentially you can run this effect where you activate main, you choose one of your opponent's battle cards and send it to the warp. This is it's a kind of a last ditch effort. We don't really want to be spending our energy on battle cards like this unless it's a negate. But it is a removal card. So between this and using the 8-drop, you can remove 2 things on a turn, which is very versatile. Also, it is a 15k, so you can use it to swing into a Unison or something else on board to get rid of it. And we have the side deck. So we have 1 more Dragon Tackle, just in case we are playing a heavy Unison deck. Golden Frieza would be a very good candidate for this card, because they have a Unison on board. And now if they take the markers off, that card will lose any effects that card was given, which is very cool. So like if the card gains like double strike or triple strike for the turn and you use Ultimate Dragon Tackle and they take the markers off, that card will lose the power boost and the effect. So 1 more Powerball. If we're playing against red or very just aggro decks, we're going to side in the 4th one of these. Also, it's very good against Cumber. You can just warp the Foos, and you're probably gonna want to keep the Foo on board for a while, but you can at least warp the Foos. You can warp in Golden Frieza, you can warp a lot of their 1-drops so they don't get the draw effects. You can warp a lot of 15k bodies as well in red. Very good. 4 Ultimate Dragon Slaying Bullet. Another side deck option for any yellow deck, because most yellow decks like to play Gohan or they play Trunks. So this is just a good counter for those decks as well. 1 Flame Shot. This is kind of like a Brainwash No More card. It's not very good, but it is there just in case. If you're playing against like a really heavy aggro red deck, or like a deck that has like a quad strike or something like that, right? Like you can kind of bait your opponent into trying to kill you, and then your opponent will also mill a card off of this effect as well. 1 more Ice Ray for aggro matchups. We have these are the only non-Shadow Dragon cards we side, and these are very particular cards. So Kami is for yellow. So unfortunately, there is a particular card in yellow that 2 particular cards in yellow that make this deck completely unplayable. I'm not gonna go over them. I'm sure people can figure out what they are. But there are 2 cards in yellow. They're not super playable now in yellow. They're not played a ton, but they're still there. So if for whatever reason you run into that deck and those cards, you cannot remove those cards because this deck does not have barrier removal, you need a card like Kami. Kami will come down, draw you a card, and then tap 2. You get to kill everything on board, ignoring barrier that's 4 or less. This way you can remove whatever's on board, and then hopefully have another energy or 2 energy up so you can play defense. But you do have to run this card, unfortunately, in the side deck, just because you can't get rid of barrier. And then we have Black Smoke, kind of for the same thing. We run 4 Black Smoke. This card also allows us to draw, which is very powerful. So it's just a tap 2, draw 2. Sometimes you just need the draw in this deck, or you need to remove a Unison, or you need to remove a card with barrier. So this card is perfect for this deck. You just slide it right in. Unfortunately, it doesn't count as a Shadow Dragon, which is really stupid. I wish Bandai would have fixed that, so that way we can actually grab this card. If this card was searchable in Sin, in this particular deck, I would probably play nothing but this deck now. But unfortunately, right now, it's been a little power creeped because it's a little slow. We need some form of in-archetype barrier removal, or just a new variety of battle cards, preferably a battle card that has barrier that we can play all of the chain cards off of, because if you can play a lot of the chain cards, there's very good cards in the actual chain of Shadow Dragons, but they're not viable to play for 2 energy because they're just going to die. So if we get a better selection, we might be able to play this deck again. But as of right now, it's kind of it is what it is. It will catch people off guard if they're not prepared for it. Depending on what you mill, it's kind of how your game goes. Like if you mill your Smoke Dragon Secret Rare, you might as well just scoop, because it's gonna be very difficult to win. I don't think you have enough in your deck unless the deck is just completely drawing just you know, a ton of cards, you can still probably mill them out. Because I've won tons of games without Black Smoke. I used to play the yellow Shadow Dragon Secret Rare that came with this deck. The yellow one that counts as black. I used to play that and still mill people out. So it's still possible, but Black Smoke just makes it so much easier. So, but this is the Xeno deck for the current set 20 set. So if you guys want to check it out, there will be a link down below so you guys can actually see the entire list by itself, so you guys don't have to pause the video and look at it that way. As well, thank you guys for all the support. As always, I appreciate it. Thank you guys for watching. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.